Well, Team Biden is starting to scare the hell out of me. Just as we're saying goodbye to one president, the team that's emerging now for the Joe Biden camp is starting to really scare me. You know, as Glenn Greenwald had written, there's three things we need to be worried about right now with the Biden presidency: wars, corporate elites, and censorship. So that's what we need to be worried about. I started going through the names, the different people who are now coming into the Biden cabinet, who are being selected for top positions, and I am incredibly troubled about it. So let's just go through a couple of these. I want to start in reverse order, though, because one of the ones that hasn't gotten much discussion is censorship. People have been talking about the war hawks and all, you know, the warmongers and so forth, the chicken hawks and others who are going to be a part of this Biden cabinet, in many ways sort of insulating him from any progressive ideas. That's what I guess at the end of the day, I'm most worried about that, is that you had progressives who are running and saying, we're going to throw our vote behind you, Joe Biden, but we want you to stand with us, you know, ending fracking, you know, helping the environment, you know, some sort of universal health care, maybe some sort of universal basic income, push for a federal minimum wage increase, all of those things. Ending these foreign wars. Will you do it? Yeah, I'm gonna be right there with you. So now what happens is you surround yourself with sycophants, right? You insulate yourself like in a bubble so that you don't hear these outside progressive voices anymore. They just get shut off. It's like a dome. It's like that Stephen King book, The Dome, right? Just like boom, right over top of you. And, you know, when you're White House chief of staff and you're in that Oval Office, like the only things that get to you are filtered. They're coming through a filter, like a Brita filter. And that Brita filter right now is troubling me. So let's start with censorship. Richard Stengel was the longest serving Undersecretary of State for Public Diplomacy and Public Affairs in the U.S. history. And at the State Department, he was under Barack Obama. Stengel boasted that he not only started the only entity in government, a non-classified entity that combated Russian disinformation. He was a big Russiagate promoter. He called it the Global Engagement Center, and it amounted to basically a massive vehicle for advancing U.S. propaganda around the world. He, in fact, called it an information war. He also worked at Time Magazine, by the way. So he's there like foisting propaganda while he was at Time Magazine. He wrote a book on this called Information Wars: How We Lost the Global Battle Against Disinformation and What We Can Do About It. He has also promoted rethinking the First Amendment. The reason the censorship issue is such a big deal right now, you've got Twitter, censoring tweets from crazy people. You've got Facebook taking it upon themselves to curate news. You see this big push right now for all these conservatives to move over to this new Parler app because they're so sick and tired of Twitter and Facebook for censoring things. You know, my thing is like these companies, these big media companies that are run by these billionaires are basically telling you what you're allowed to hear. Like when the president tweets, "I won the election," let him tweet that. Why does there have to be a thing underneath it that says, this is a violation of Twitter's terms of service? We have found that this is not accurate. So they get to pick and choose. Pick and choose what speech we get to listen to. Stengel has, again, proposed rethinking the First Amendment that guarantees the freedom of speech. And in 2018, he stated, quote, "Having once been almost a First Amendment absolutist, I have really moved my position on it. Because I just think for practical reasons in society, we have to kind of rethink some of those things." Yeah, so now he's coming to work for Joe Biden. Here he is talking about, this was at a press conference where he was leading a panel on this. And he talked about how he believes propaganda is good and that we basically need to feed people misinformation to drive a certain narrative. Yeah, here he is answering a question from the audience, and then watch as the guy in the audience asks a follow-up question, and he just stops the rest of the show. He's like, that's it. I don't like answering questions anymore. Listen.
So you'll be the last question, but I just want to weigh in on that for 1 second. So there's another word for master narratives. It's called history. Basically, every country creates their own narrative story. And you know, my old job at the State Department was what people used to joke as the chief propagandist job. We haven't talked about propaganda. Propaganda, I'm not against propaganda. Every country does it, and they have to do it to their own population. And I don't necessarily think it's that awful. And this idea of
do you hear that? I'm just blown away by how he continues this. Listen.
Of a news cartel. I mean, I was editor of Time in 2012 during that election, and I remember, you know, you're competing against cartels and everybody. I remember being on a panel with the then editor of the New York Times, who said it's really hard to break through these days. This is the editor of the New York Times saying it's hard to break through. I wanted to jump off the platform. Like, what's it like for the rest of everybody? So, I mean, there are cartels, but cartels don't have hegemony like they used to. The gentleman right there, last question.
I don't think you want to address it.
Watch him walk away from this question.
In terms of understanding what happened in the world. Because what is happening in America is what the United States flipped on the global south and in the third world, which we live with for many, many years in terms of a master narrative that was and still is propaganda.
He's called him out about propaganda.
You know what? I hate last questions. Don't you? I usually just want to end something before the last question. But at any rate, I want to thank this fantastic panel here today.
I'm not going to answer that. America spreading propaganda. Just not going to answer it. He's telling them, like, look, we have to suffer because you create these narratives. The third world, other countries have to suffer because you create these narratives. I'm not going to answer that question. Thank you, great panel. Just going to wrap things up. Now, welcome him to the Biden administration. Chief propagandist. Think you're going to get straight answers? A chief propagandist at the helm? We'll see. Oh, and then when we ask tough questions as the independent media, see if we get laughed at. We get laughed at by the corporate media, by the way. Oh, how could you ask that question? Everyone in the room laughs. Oh, you're asking that kind of a tough question? Oh, God. He won't be invited back to another press conference. The press corps. I love that the press corps at the White House is the press corps. Like, thank God we've got the press corps in the White House. You have to be part of a multi-billion-dollar media organization to get a seat in the White House. Do you think my show could get in there? You watch this show, you support independent journalism, covering stories you're not going to hear in the mainstream media. That's why you watch this show. I'm not afraid to go after Team Biden. I'm not afraid to go after Team Trump. And I'll tell you the truth. Would I be able to get an invitation to have a chair in the press pool at the White House? No. You have to be a part of NBC News, MSNBC, Fox News. We have to lie to the American people. That's what he's telling us. We have to spin things to the American people. That's his job. That was his job, and he's going to be doing it again under the Biden administration. Imagine reading those articles that he wrote while he was at Time magazine. We have to lie to the American people. I was the chief propaganda, and you know what? It's not bad at all.
Well, and they're going to be bringing up how progressive he's going to be by bringing, female staff in, like the Michelle Flourney, that's going to be possibly head of the Pentagon, who's like, people don't understand that that's not a progressive thing. There's going to be more war, definitely, with somebody like that in there. Like they hide it under the auspice of we're being progressive, but they're just filling the cabinet with more warmongers. That's all these people are.
Yeah, not just her. I mean, look, we got Linda Thomas Greenfield. She was a U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs. She was appointed leader of the Biden-Harris Senate State Department team. She was a stalwart ally with Susan Rice. She pushed for the war in Libya. You know, make no mistake, just because they're women doesn't mean they don't want to go to war. She pushed for the invasion of Iraq. She was also involved in the decision to remove peacekeepers from the United Nations, which enabled the Rwandan genocide. By the way, the Rwandan genocide, as Bill Clinton pointed out, was the worst, was what he considered his biggest failure as president of the United States. Not only that, so you mentioned one, I mentioned Linda Thomas Greenfield. There's more. I mean, Lisa Sawyer, here's another one that's now going to be a part of the Biden campaign, Biden team. She served as director for NATO and European Strategic Affairs for National Security Council from 2014 to 2015, worked for Wall Street's JP Morgan Chase as foreign policy advisor. Sawyer was part of the Center for a New American Securities Task Force on the Future of Coercive Economic Statecraft. So, Mommy, what do you do? Well, basically, that means that we use methods of economic warfare to destabilize countries around the world that don't agree with us. Mommy, really? You do that? Yeah, that's my job, honey. How does that work? Well, basically, we send all kinds of disinformation and we destabilize currency around the world so that their people suffer and their economies collapse, and then they will work with us. Oh, Mommy, you're so great. Lisa Sawyer. So she'll be working with Team Biden. Sawyer believes the U.S. government is not doing enough to deter Russian aggression. She wants U.S. troop levels to return to the levels they were at in 2012. She wants offensive weapons shipments to the Ukraine in force, which would be an increase in a violation of the Minsk agreements. So yes, let's make sure that our big defense contractors can just start producing way more weapons, and we can send them to the Ukraine. And we can destabilize countries that don't agree with us. That'll help people around the world, because everyone should agree with us. We're the United States. Everyone should agree with us.
Well, and the thing is, like, it's like so right in your face what their agenda is really going to be, because it's almost like they could not wait to start getting these people in place. They just couldn't get them there fast enough.
Yeah. It's like they had a list. Like they just pull it out of a safe, you know? It's like, all right, go to the neoliberal safe. Do you have the neoliberal safe open? Okay, we have a laundry list. You know, it's like last night I was watching The Crown, the new season of The Crown. Margaret Thatcher, played by Gillian Anderson, formerly of X-Files fame. She's fantastic. She meets with the Queen for the first time. And the Queen says, you know, I'm something of a novice sort of... I can figure out your cabinet pretty well. Like, I'm really good at this. I know who you're going to pick. So she's like, it's fun for me. Let me just pick and so she pulls out a list. You know, she's like, Secretary of War. Did I get it right? She's like, yeah. She just goes down the list. She like knows all these people because they're the names that are just, they're always around. Let's go back to the list. This weekend, I was watching Jen Psaki from the Obama administration. I saw her pop up again. So she's back. She's with the Biden team. All of these people are back. So when I've told you on this show that, you know, don't think you're going to see much of change at all, this is what I'm talking about. This is exactly what I'm talking about. When you have all of these people who are now going to insulate President Biden from any sort of meaningful change. Otherwise, it's going to take him sitting at the Resolute desk in the Oval Office saying, you know what, guys, I know we ran on certain things. And I hear all of you. But what I want to do is I want to affect real change in this country. I don't care if I go down swinging because of it. I'm going to pass universal health care. He's going to have everyone in that office going, no. No, we can't do that. We can't do that. I want to get us out of the Middle East. No, we can't do that. See, look at President Trump. In praise of President Trump, he has tried to get us out of these foreign wars, and he's had enormous pushback. He's had enormous pushback from these career Pentagon, these non-elected career Pentagon people that are basically like, no, I know you want an executive order or with troop withdrawal in the Middle East, but we're not going to do it. Or the way that they do it is they pull back some to make the president happy, and then they move more over. That's what's happening. So this like deep state is real. This like deep militaristic state in this country is real. You know, to his credit, President Trump ran on ending these foreign wars. It's one of the reasons he got elected. But then when he got to town, he was pushed back by the Pentagon. He had these war hawks, these warmongers that wanted to keep going because they know it means the future. You know, they have to pay for these defense contracts. They have to make money off of it.
Well, and this
a substantial percentage of these people worked with Obama.
This is what got Kennedy in big trouble because he was like he went against them. That's with the whole Cuban crisis. He went against them and
yeah.
They were constantly in his ear, telling him.
When you go against the military-industrial complex, it doesn't end well for you. And that's why you don't win re-election, by the way.
Well, and that was my whole argument to some of my friends is like, I almost prefer the idea of Trump. I know he's bad, but at least he tweeted. His ego was so big that he tweeted things that he was doing. All of the stuff that Biden's going to do is going to be done in secret, and we're going to have no idea. And it's going to be done under the auspice of progressive, like being progressive, but that's not going to be the case. It's going to be, again, where we know nothing. There's no transparency. We have no idea unless you pay attention to foreign news news cycles that anything's even going on anywhere.
Yeah, because we're not going to learn about it. We know how insulated Biden already is. And by the way, we saw that press conference the other day where he was just like handed a bunch of softball questions, right? Like, oh, Mr. President-elect, thank you for taking my question. I mean, it was like night and day difference between a Trump press conference, right, and a Biden press conference. It was funny to watch. But again, this is a prime example of this, interventionist-minded, establishment-oriented figures that are going to be a part of this campaign, a part of this new team. Like, we need to go into other countries. We need to tell other people what to think. We need to start spreading America all over the place again. We need to keep going into these different countries and starting wars like we did in Libya, Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan. Let's just line them up. Get them all in here. So this military-industrial complex, this corporate elite, this continuing of foreign wars, all of these corporate elites that worked at J.P. Morgan and Wall Street banks. Folks, this is what I say, watch what they do, not what they say. So what Biden has said is he's going to take on a very progressive agenda. He's heard the voices of progressives in this country. Okay, you're not president yet. We'll keep watching, but I'm going to keep reporting on this here on the show because it's incredibly important. This is what I don't want people to do is to go back asleep. Don't fall back asleep. It's happening right before your eyes right now. Team Biden is starting to scare the hell out of me. Let me know your thoughts on this. Drop me a comment below. Smash that like button if you'd be so kind. And subscribe to the channel. There's a little bell notification you can turn on. You can set it for a couple of different options. You can set it so when we go live, you can turn it for that, or you can set it for all. So anytime we publish a new video, you'll get that notification as well. But please turn that on. That way you'll know when we go live. We go live every morning at 9 a.m. Eastern time. So thank you so much for joining us.